you, Mr. Moderator. So before the House today, the resolution is the world needs more Canada. And what we on government mean by this is, well, by needs more Canada, we mean that the world needs Canada to take on a greater role on the international stage, whether this be on issues such as climate change, in terms of human rights missions and humanitarian aid. So today, what I'm going to do for you is present one key point from my side. I'm going to talk about why the world needs Canada to participate more in terms of human rights missions and to give more humanitarian aid. And then my partner is going to talk about the climate change issue and why Canada has to contribute there. So for my one constructive point today, what it really comes down to is this idea that there are numerous places in the world right now that are in dire need of whatever help they can get. And Canada is not, being a G8 country, being, a relatively strong country in terms of, its economics, in terms of its military, has the resources, we believe, to contribute to and to help the situation, improve the situation in these countries.
Mr. Speaker, now, ladies and gentlemen, as side proposition as proposed through this debate, the resolution before the House today is that this House needs more Canada. And they've quite reasonably defined this resolution to mean Canada should take more of a role in international affairs and more of a role on the international stage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in my address today, I'm really going to be focusing on three chief objectives. First, I'd like to take a look at what side proposition has talked about in their debate thus far, and really show you why their one contention doesn't hold much weight. And secondly, I'd like to bring forth two chief constructive matters of my own, and really solidify and get side opposition's case off to a good start. Then lastly, I'd really like to tie this debate back to one fundamental issue and show you ultimately why we on side opposition have quite clearly won this debate. But ladies and gentlemen, before I get into all of this, I'd really like to take a step back and look at what this debate really boils down to. Really frame this debate and really look at what this debate revolves around. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we outside opposition are going to be maintaining throughout this debate that we really need to be looking at this debate from a two-part perspective. Firstly, we need to be looking at it from the perspective of what's best for Canada, and then secondly, looking at it from the perspective of what's best for the world. And that is really what we are going to be focusing on today on side opposition, and really showing you that Canada really doesn't need to have more of a role on the international stage, and from the Canadian as well as the world's perspective, it is worse off to do so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here on Side Government today, we're still in firm belief that Canada should be playing a larger role on the world stage, that the world does in fact need more Canada. And I have one constructive point to present to you today, and that is the point about climate change. But first of all, I'd like to address some of the points made by the Honourable Opposition today. Now, they've said that they basically talked about two main things, and they fall into the categories of what's best for Canada and what's best for the world. Now, on the side of what's best for Canada, they believe that this Canadian involvement in human rights issues and humanitarian aid is simply making other countries resentful, and the costs far outweigh the benefit, and in the long run, this is not what's best for Canada. However, we on side government believe that for example, Afghanistan has been talked a lot about today, so I'll just carry on with that. Side opposition has said that the costs far outweigh the benefits, because with all these soldiers dying and not much progress being seen, it would be far better for Canada to pull out.
Mr. Speaker, now, ladies and gentlemen, for decades, Canada has played a massive role in the affairs of other countries abroad. And what we have to realize is they're in these countries doing things like promoting democracy, providing humanitarian aid. And as nice as it sounds in principle, what we on side opposition realize is that in practice, first of all, it doesn't work. But second of all, more importantly, our involvement in the affairs of other nations abroad had bad repercussions for us and for the other nations that we are in. And it is on that grounds that we would say that this resolution should fall, that the world does not need more Canada. Now that we've got lines. So I'd like to move into a bit of a refutation, point by point, of what side prop has said this far. And before I get into the point by point, I have to establish with you that side proposition is arguing the case that the world needs more Canada. In order to do that, they have really only brought forth two examples within the vast spectrum of things that Canada does help other countries. For example, they brought forth the 2 points of humanitarian aid and the global climate.
What we have to realize is that Canada's involvement in international affairs isn't restricted to these two examples. And even if side proposition was able to prove to you that with humanitarian aid and climate change, Canada needs to be more involved, it doesn't make this resolution pass, because they ignored the vast majority of what Canada is doing in the outside world, and have failed to actually argue the principle of our involvement in international affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, once again. So in this short 3-minute speech, I'm going to boil down what we on side proposition think this debate has come down to. I'm going to boil it down to 2 key questions. Number 1, what is Canada good for? Number 2, how effective is Canada when it goes into these different countries in terms of humanitarian aid? And how effective is it with regards to climate change? Now, in response to this first question, they would tell you, to put it in plain terms, Canada sucks. We are ineffectual, we do nothing, when we go into other countries, we screw up and hurt them, make them hate us. Okay, so what we on side proposition would respond to that is to say that no, that is not at all true. We think that Canada, as Canadians, we believe that Canada is effectual, and when it goes into other countries, and whether it be providing humanitarian aid or military aid, it does do something. And we've brought up examples today to show you, to prove that to you.